pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Here.
Councilman McCarthy.
Here.
Councilman Wareham.
Here.
Councilman Creighton.
Here.
Councilman Malloy.
Here.
Good evening, everyone. We have a public hearing tonight to consider a zone petition, 2012 number 1, is submitted by Boulder Smithtown Properties to amend the condition on a previously approved change of zone on property located on the northwest corner of Wisconsin-Port Jefferson Highway and Mount Pleasant Road in Smithtown, New York.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, member of the board, Donald King for Tony Scotto and Insignia Restaurant. As you know, the board was kind enough to lift some covenants and allow us to expand the restaurant inside and the outdoor dining. And after it opened, there was quite a few cars parking along 347 Mount Pleasant Road, and some parking was put in. We're back here to try to work this out to the best that we can. Originally was a 100-foot buffer. We were proposing a 58-foot buffer with parking that would take up 42 feet. Frank DeRubius today submitted a revised plan that I think has a lot of merit to it. We were looking it over. We'd like some time to analyze that and come back to.
And he being the planning director?
Planning director of Smithtown.
We're on camera.
Yes.
Okay.
Did a good job, and he has some points, and I think maybe we can shake this out so it works out to everybody's best interest. In addition, Mr. Scotto is considering a retractable awning over the dining area with drop curtains. That's the outside dining area. So without belaboring it, I think maybe we can put something together here that works in everybody's best interest.
Okay, but we still need to go through with the public hearing here.
Yes.
And it was for one condition or many conditions? This public hearing is for one condition or two? Multiple conditions, okay. Okay. Well, I want to be clear for the public.
Yeah, essentially
Okay.
it's the setback, the buffer that we're talking about, and depth to groundwater were the two variances that I was before the Zoning Board of Appeals
Okay,
last
so
week.
you want to make a case or you want to wait?
Well, I think we understand it, that we were looking for this buffer that would be 58 feet. Mr. DeRubius came up with a buffer that's approximately, is 80 feet, and I think between Mr. Scotto and his team analyzing it, I think we could come back with something that would be workable and maybe satisfactory to everybody.
Okay, so then we'll go to those who wish to be heard on this matter.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Lorraine Rossi.
Good evening. My name is Lorraine Rossi. I live at 12 Brilna Drive and have for over 35 years in Smithtown. I'm here to address the same issue I addressed at the town board meeting about a week and a half ago, and that's the quality of life of the residents on Brilna Drive. We want to be good neighbors. We want to trust everybody. We want to work so that everybody is happy. But I came before you and expressed our displeasure with the parking situation, and we were told that that was not a legal thing and no one was allowed to park on that 50 feet, and that this restaurant was issued a summons. But I have to tell you, Supervisor, as I pulled out of my house to come to this meeting tonight, there are cars parked there tonight as we speak. It's very hard to establish trust when we see that kind of thing. The noise is also an issue for us. This is not the summer yet. We're already hearing the noise. We're already hearing the cars on the gravel. We're already hearing the patrons. It is not really the problem of the people on Brilna Drive if this is a hardship. It's a hardship for us also, and we're asking the town board to act in our best interests. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Rossi, Donald Rossi.
members of the board. My name is Donald Rossi. I have been living at Brillner Drive for the same amount of time and married to my lovely wife, Lorraine, for that amount of time. 38 years there and 42 married. My main objection or my main concern is assuming that the buffer zone is pushed back 5 feet, 10 feet, to whatever it winds up being. I would just like to know, is the town going to enforce insignia to put the land back to the way it was before they bulldozed it out? It had a grade, and that grade helped protect our houses from flooding. Boulder Creek or Insignia doesn't have a basement, so a rise of 2 or 3 inches in the water table is not going to affect them. But it's critical for us. As I stated in the letter last week that was read for me, down the block, the town spent thousands of dollars last summer opening up streams to drain this water. I mean, it seems defeating that right away we're back to where we started out. I mean, it does not make common sense. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Rossi. Is this Lokitis, Patricia Lokitis?
Good evening, Supervisor. Good evening, Board. My name is Patricia Lokitis. I live at 16 Sandalwood Drive in Smithtown. That's 1 block north of Brillner Drive. Before me, I have a letter dated March 7th, 2011, and attached to it is a letter dated February 23rd, 2011. The February letter is from Mr. Derubies to John M. Kennedy, legislator, and the March 7th is from Legislator Kennedy to my family. We've lived at Sandalwood Drive for 44 years, just under 44 years. It's talking about the enlargement of the building and the fact that it was 7,000 feet and they wanted to add 3,000 feet. But the current seating capacity of 251 seats was not going to increase, and therefore there would be no problem with water. If they were enlarging the building 3,000 feet, and I believe they did because I saw them constructing it all the time, what is it being used for if it's not seating capacity? I understand that there's a lounge and a bar. Does that not count as seating capacity? And if not, doesn't that still use water and put pressure on the land, et cetera, and increase our situation as far as water goes?
Okay, I won't be able to answer that at the end of this, all of the folks that are going to be heard.
I understand that. That's
I'm
fine.
going to ask the planning director to address that issue.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
thank you.
Well, at the end, we'll have all that discussed. Matt Sedukati.
Thank you. In the spirit of the evening, I'll try to be brief.
Sure.
Obviously, I'll reserve final judgment till I see whatever proposal that the planning board has come up with. But I just wanted to mention a few things. My wife had written a letter. I don't think I'll read tonight. But as far as the issue with the water table is concerned, last weekend, I guess there was an issue with the sewer system over at the facility. Friday night, my basement flooded. I had that documented with the town public safety office as best as I could. The next morning, there was a sewage company at the facility for quite a while. They've been there since. I'm obviously assuming that there was a sewage issue, but there was no rain over the past week and a half. I'm the closest to the property. Only my basement flooded. There was some indication that it was foul water, the stains that were left when it was dried out. That's without any rain. It's been a dry winter. Already, I'm having water encroach on my basement. The weekend before, I have a police report of someone had jumped over the back fence onto my property and got stuck in my property because my gate is near where my wife and I were watching TV. And so he had to knock down, he or she, whoever it was in my backyard, had to knock down part of my fence to escape in the front yard. And the police had surmised that it was most likely a teenager or whatever that came over from the back fence and got stuck. So I'm already having these issues over the holidays, 3 or 4 nights a week. My children did not sleep. They would complain of nightmares of hearing footsteps because of the pounding bass from the music coming from their bar well after hours. The parking fills up only after dinner hours is when the majority of the parking is needed. It's after 9 o'clock at night. That's when the parking starts filling up. Obviously, it's in everyone's best interest to find a common ground. Otherwise, this would just never end. I understand that. But we really are suffering hardships in this neighborhood. And I have no choice but to be here tonight. It's a quality of life issue for us. Thank you.
Does the water come up from the basement? It doesn't come into a window, does it?
No, it doesn't.
It comes up from the basement.
Our water table is so
Okay.
shallow.
All right.
I actually forgot to mention, we signed a petition pursuant to Zoning and Planning Board Code, Article 16, Section 265, Paragraph 1B. It's more than 20% of the adjacent property owners have signed it to enact the supermajority requirement.
Yes.
I don't know who I should present that to.
Yeah. A.D. Seta Ducati.
Mr. Supervisor, respected board members, first I'd like to say that I wish all the success to Mr. Scotto and to the Insignia Restaurant. It's a wonderful thing that he's done to create this property that's so successful. However, this success should not be at the cost of the residents and the neighbors. And I think the main problem is that this is really a restaurant that operates from time to time as a catering hall. And one of the ladies before me said, there's so much square footage for the restaurant and only 251 seats. Could it be that the rest of the square footage, the hardwood floors in the banquet rooms that they have described on their website, are for dancing, and that the noises that are heard there are from DJs that are playing loud dance music? Now, from what I can surmise from the town code online, thank you for doing that, a restaurant has a different category than a discotheque. And if this is a restaurant, let it be a restaurant. But if it's a discotheque, I would surmise that it would have to be subject to different zoning laws and different regulations, because I do believe they're having dancing there. And notwithstanding all of the other issues, that's causing most of the noise. But if the restaurant operates as a restaurant, if it would operate with unamplified music, as many were thought that's what they were going to have when they applied for their first application to the Zoning Appeals Board, that would be fine. But what we have here is 3 separate catering rooms, and you can call their catering manager, and they're soliciting for weddings and all sorts of celebrations. So I say that may be the source of the problem. And my son did speak. He's having problems there because he's the closest resident. There are solutions to these problems. Number one, the parking. There is a large area in the front of the restaurant that is currently a ditch. That could be filled in and parking could be placed there. Or someone, they could rent space in the parking lot directly across 347. They have stated that they have professional valet service to park the car so it wouldn't endanger any of their customers. And finally, if it is a restaurant, let it operate as a restaurant and not as a catering hall or discotheque. So I hope we can solve these issues, because I do admire the accomplishments that Mr. Scotto has made, but not at the expense of the residents.
Thank you, Mr. Ducati. Larry Vetter.
Good evening. My name is Larry Vetter. I reside in number 18 Brillner Drive. I've been there for roughly about 32 years right now. I'm one of the 7 houses that board the easement that's located between our property and the Insignia restaurant. Last week I had the opportunity to see the plans that were submitted to the planning board for the additional parking lot that wanted to be done. There was no accommodations in there for any of the drainage at all on the new parking lot. I know that when the original building was built, a great deal of effort was put into making sure that the drainage was proper and that it would return water to the ground in as natural a way as humanly possible. This seems to have been ignored at this time. Also, there is currently a parking lot that's been put there. It looks like a temporary parking lot. It's a gravel parking lot that was pounded down on a Saturday evening. And they did this by filling in a ditch that was there. For want of a better term, that ditch was working as a mini recharge basin. All of these things serve to impact the groundwater around the area. I won't belabor the groundwater issue. I'm sure you're well aware of it. It's been going on for a lot of years. In my time there, I've seen peaks and valleys where at periods it's fine for a long time, and then at other times it's severe. Where my basement has been wetted a few times in the past, as well as just about all of my neighbors in there. I ask that if you are going to allow anything to happen back there, that you please consider the impact to the groundwater. This town has spent a lot of money dredging out the headwaters to the Nissaquag River, and from what I understand, you're seeking funding right now to continue some additional dredging. I read that in a local paper. I don't know how accurate that is. But all of that work and money will go to waste if this type of building is continued to allow. Please consider the neighborhood before you allow any additions. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorraine Vetter.
Good evening. My name is Lorraine Vetter. I live at 18 Brillner Drive. I have one of the homes that is right against Insignia Restaurant. I'm concerned about several things, the drainage being the first one, the noise, and I was told that Insignia is working on reaching some sort of compromise, wishing to be a good neighbor. What I've seen so far is anything but. I have headlights from the cars in my kitchen right now. I have lights from their parking lot shining in my backyard. I have a dog. My dog, as of late, is bringing bones to the backyard, food to the backyard. Their dumpsters are never covered. The noise that I hear every night it's loud. My bedroom is in the front of the house, and I hear it. I go to sleep hearing boom, 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 boom. As I said, I don't see good neighbors, and I am fearful for what will happen if their parking lot is expanded. They have valets. They can park one in back of each other. They don't need more room. There's plenty of space between rows of cars. Individuals aren't parking. Valets are parking. I've gone places where they pull up one in back of another car. And that's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our planning director is here, and I think he'll be able to address some of the issues that were raised here regarding the size, the restaurant, the bar, etc., and a possible compromise in terms of the parking. Would you address that?
You want my pointer?
He should address the water question first.
Mr. Supervisor, members of the board, I turned the illustration around because most of the members have a copy of this particular illustration, and I believe the public has not yet seen this. About a week ago, I met with several members of the board to discuss this particular site, and I would stress that what was discussed was many of the issues that was raised here, including the issue of groundwater. There was also an issue of traffic safety. There was also an issue of fire safety that was brought onto the site, as well as the issue of nuisance to the adjacent residents. And what was asked of us was to examine the plan by Boulder Creek or Boulder Enterprise and to see if we could change that so that we could provide more parking on the site while still protecting the residents that are in that particular area. Without going into many details, we went through many variations, and the plan that is before you is the plan that I'm recommending for the board to consider if you wished to change the conditions of the site. Essentially, there are three elements, as I mentioned to you in my previous memorandum of this particular site. The first is we redesigned the parking lot, the existing parking lot, to make it more efficient in terms of storing cars. We're recognizing that the applicant is doing valet parking, so the parking lot was redesigned with that in mind. I would mention one of the areas that we did examine at length, because it was mentioned by one of the residents, with regard to parking cars out front. Because there is major drainage problems in that area, our engineering department and just about everybody else said, no, we can't fill that area in. We did look at that, and that was not viable. However, the area towards Mount Pleasant Road, we did examine that, and we do have additional parking that's located there. The second thing that we did was we did allow a 20-foot reduction of the 100-foot buffer. And that is going to have, if you locate on the north side, a double row of parking, which would be valet parking. To compensate for that reduction, what we are proposing, and it's illustrated in the design that's before you, is a 10-foot berm that would run along the back of the property. That berm would be approximately 50 feet wide out of the 80 feet. What we would not do is there's a row of existing vegetation about 30 feet that's closest to the residents on the north side. The rest of that area, most of it has been cleared, and we would not touch that. The berm itself would be in front of that particular area. It would have a basically flat top. It would not be a peak type berm, and it would be planted. I believe we showed in the illustration that's before you, you'll see a scale of what, these are all to scale that you have in front of you, are examples of a car with a typical couple walking by. This buffer, we believe, is far more effective than the existing buffer. Even though they have 100 feet of existing buffer, you are going to get headlights, noise, even at 100 feet. That's going to go through here. With the 10-foot berm that's planted in front of this particular area, in most cases, you're not going to get any lights whatsoever. And I'm going to check, by the way, on if there's any exterior lights that are shining towards the residents. I'm going to check on that one. But there should be no traffic lights that are going to be visible from the residents, as well as the fact that, in our experience, earthen berms are great sound absorbers, so that they're much better than fences in terms of protecting sounds, although they're not the entire answer, and I'll let the applicant speak on that. We discussed, if you recall, we had a problem with celebrations over in Gyrodyne, and they were able to install new insulation in their particular building, so we did not have the problem there. I'll let the applicant speak on that. They're going to propose an additional insulation on that particular site, but that's not part of my proposal. The only thing that I would mention, however, is that there is a set on the northwest side of the property. We only have a 5-foot berm because the front portion of that is where their septic system is located. And we can't obviously bury that particular septic system. And what we're going to propose in that particular area is larger landscaping to make up for the lack of a berm and possible even a small fence at the top of that particular area. That's basically the design that we worked on. And from the numbers, the applicant was asking for an increase in parking spaces from 122 to 181. We're providing 237 with this particular design. Now, granted, it's a valet design. It's not a regular parking design. But we think that if we're going to make adjustments, that this is the best balance that we could think of between protecting the residents and allowing some expansion on this particular site. With regard to the question that was answered on the health department, the short answer is that before a certificate of occupancy is issued, the health department has a copy of the plans and reviews the plans and grants a CO. If they grant the CO, that's their call. There's nothing we can do about that. So in other words, it meets their prerogatives. I happen to agree with the person that spoke that there's probably is a larger generation of water, but that's not our domain. That's the health department. If they've approved this site, then it's beyond the town's hands. I would mention, however, with regard to the design of this particular site, we were concerned about water flow. And if you recall that in a discussion I've had with several of you, what we're recommending for many of these paved areas are what they call semi-impermeable surfaces, such as grasscrete, which will absorb the drainage much better than a hard surface would. And actually, grass actually grows through parts of these things. So, Mr. Supervisor, members of the board, that basically is what the planning department is proposing to do on the site.
Okay, I needed one question. There was supposed to be a 100-foot buffer.
That's correct.
50 feet has now been taken away.
Currently, right now.
Currently, correct. And you're proposing a 10-foot wide berm?
No. The berm itself is going to be a 10-foot high berm.
Right.
It's going to be 50 feet wide, in other words, in depth.
Okay.
Okay. From the front of the berm to the back of the berm, this is about 50 feet.
Okay.
And it's
So in effect, they will only be losing 10 feet of the buffer.
No, 20 feet of the buffer.
20 feet.
20 feet for one parking lane. This buffer, by the way, is similar, if anybody wants to take a look, at the same buffer we have across the street at Hidden Ponds. It's basically almost similar design.
Okay. Does anybody want to answer a question? Sure. No, wait, Vinny, I'll handle that. Mrs. Rossi, would you please come to the microphone?
Mr. King, and I understand, asked for time. I have to be here. Okay. Mr. King asked for time to consider this because he's just being familiar with it. Well, we're not familiar with it either. So before the board makes a recommendation, will the residents have a little bit more say? Can we come back and speak on it or speak it with you in
Well,
your office?
I was going to suggest that if Mr. DeRubies can make a meeting with those of you who are interested and at your convenience, and that might solve some of the problems, and you'll see a more definitive map as to what will occur or what won't occur. And if you guys give you okay, then I think we have a ballgame.
But this would happen before you make a
Oh,
final
yes,
judgment.
absolutely.
Okay,
And
thank
that's
you.
what the attorney asked for, some time to consider it. Okay, yes, Mr. Seta Ducati.
Strictly for informational purposes, obviously I agree with my neighbor, but there is actually a private agreement between the former owner of the property and the residents behind the property that says that that final 50 feet between the residential and commercial properties may not be modified without express written consent from all 7 property owners. So I like the berm, but it encroaches on the 50 feet, which means that legally everyone would have to agree with it in writing. So I just thought you guys should know that.
Frank, you affirm that?
We're aware of that, and that there's some elements of that are being reviewed by the town attorney's office because there's some other aspects of that particular condition. So yes, we're aware of that
Okay,
condition.
so when and if you have the meeting, that you'll have answers to that question?
Well,
From the town attorney?
Yes, I will have answers
Okay.
to the question, yes.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Patricia Lakaitis, Sandalwood Drive. As far as the berm goes, that sounds good to me, but what's the guarantee that the trees are going to live? I understand there was a berm there when Boulder Creek was there, and all the trees died, and that was the end of that. No one ever replaced them or anything. I realize that a berm is porous, and the water will seep in and all of that, so that sounds good. But we want, if the trees are supposed to be there.
If this went through, and the condition would be that the berm would be planted and treed, they'd have to put up what is called a growth and life bond, which means that protects the town from the plants that might die. They'd have to replace them.
Well, the berm across the street in Hidden Ponds is gorgeous, so
Okay,
there's probably the same kind of agreement there. Thank you.
thank you. Yes, Mr. Senator Ducati. Where's the agenda? Here's the agenda. Okay. Got two more here.
Just a question. The applicant, Insignia Restaurant, originally asked to go from 141 to 181 spaces, and now the town is going to give them 237 spaces. Why has the town expanded the parking when the very purpose of all of the residents here is to limit the parking? I mean, they only asked for 181. I think it should be what they asked for.
You want to address that, Mr. Ortiz?
Currently, I think they have more cars visiting the sites than 181. We've had 3 site visits by my staff at night to examine that particular site. And this is with the parking lot, temporary parking lot that was full in the back. And there was not sufficient parking there on the site. So 180 parking spaces, we feel, was not going to be enough for that particular site. And I would probably could state that the owner would probably affirm that in terms of what is necessary for that site. I do think you need at least 200 to 225 parking spaces for that site so that you do not have people parked the way they currently are parking right now. In all different
But I think his question was that the town imposed 180 parking spaces on the site plan?
No, we didn't. The requirement for this particular site,
Okay.
actually, the zoning requirement is much lower. It's only about 97 parking spaces, which is required. The applicant currently has on his site about 25 more parking spaces than required. With that scenario, there's not enough parking there on the site. There was a parking lot constructed in the buffer, which I believe holds about 40 cars right now. And that's the gravel parking lot in the back. When my staff visited the site, and this was about 8 and then at 9 o'clock at night, what they found was that that whole area was filled and there was really no room in the parking lot because of the stacked cars. So with about 100 and let's say 65 or 170 spaces there on the site, they didn't have enough parking. So 181 is not going to hold that particular site. We think they're going to need what
So
we're
you're
designing.
saying, in effect, that they need more parking, and this plan gives them the parking and some degree of quiet and peace for the neighbors.
This design, I think, what we were looking at was if we're going to reduce the buffer, to make the buffer at least more effective for the residents in terms of doing what it's supposed to do, which is buffer them from the commercial uses. And so by putting in, the applicant offered to put in a large fence, which we didn't believe was going to achieve either good aesthetics or be effective enough for a sound reduction. The buffer would certainly block the view of the parked cars. Even a 5-foot buffer is going to do that. And the 10-foot buffer will absorb most of the noise that's currently coming out of there. And we think if the applicant installs the insulation that he claims that he wants to install, or the sound attenuation devices that he's going to install in the restaurant, will have the same effect as we did with Celebrations over in Jaredine. And I think most of you have been to Celebrations right now, and there's no noise that emanates outside of that, even when there's loud activity inside that site.
Okay, I guess we all kind of think that once you have that meeting, some of the questions will be, most of the questions should be answered.
Well, I'll have the meetings for the residents. They'll either meet individually or they can meet with
Okay.
me whenever it's possible, and then I'll prepare a summary for the board as to what they
And I
want.
believe the attorney said that he would, he was kind of receptive to what you had shown him or spoken to him about?
Well, what we discussed was they want to make some adjustments to the site, and I said, we call tweaking, not changing the concept. And this was done conceptually, and I'm certain that their contractor is probably going to come up with some design issues, so they want some time to take a look at that and maybe make a counter proposal, but it's not going to be conceptually that much different from what we have now. At least that's my understanding.
Is that all satisfactory to you folks? Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Dionysius Carnes. I live on 22 Brilliant Drive.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't call your name, did I?
It's okay. I wasn't going to speak before, but I like the idea of the berm, but I have a question. Our back fences are only 6 feet high, and we are proposing a berm that's 10 feet high, which is essentially 4 more feet higher than our back fences. Also, that berm is sloping against our fences, so if we have a normal rain, water will be absorbed by the berm. If we have torrential downpours like we had this past summer, or if we have the snow that we had last winter, where is all that water going to go? Is it going to come into our backyards, and is it going to flood our basements?
I think that's a question that he can answer at that meeting, and he'll be well prepared to answer it.
But we've taken that into consideration.
Okay.
Just one of the things is that there's a 30-foot setback between us and the residents, so that the slope of that berm is going to begin 30 feet from the residents right now. So it's not going to be pouring directly into that property. Secondly, it's a very gradual berm that we're putting up there. You remember, it's 50 feet wide. That's approximately the distance across this particular room. And so therefore, the slope will be relatively gradual. And what we have these berms all over town, so we have some experience with them. It is going to be permeable, so that there will be a limited amount, there will be some water runoff, but the engineering department is probably going to have the builder create swales at the bottom of that, so that we could control the flow. This was a water contamination controlling issue, was a large part of our plan, because every time we put on X amount more square feet, the engineering department was getting very concerned about how to contain that particular water. So this minimizes a lot of that impermeable surface issue for the water flow in this area.
Thank you. Okay.
Frank, on your proposal, your recommendation, is it safe to say that the additional parking that you're looking into will also keep patron parking more on-site than throughout the neighborhood? That's part of this plan, correct?
Yes, if you recall, we had a conversation. There's illegal parking that's been occurring in a lot of other sites, and that was one of the issues, was to contain the parking on this particular site, as well as to keep them from where they were parking in areas that were unsafe or causing problems. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now make a motion to close the hearing.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Well,
Yes.
Ms. Attorney, excuse me, do we want to close the hearing or do we want to leave it open?
I don't think you have anything else presented at the hearing. There's no more testimony being offered. Then you can close the hearing, Mr. Supervisor.
Okay, then I'll continue that motion.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Okay. Would you read the next hearing, please?
Town Board to consider proposed amendments to Chapter 112 of the Code entitled Building Construction Administration as it relates to unsafe structures. Number 3, the Town Board to consider proposed
Wait,
law.
let him-
Do the two first. He's got to do two.
Fucking video, keep his mouth shut. Everybody else, stop. He's not the one.
You're right.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the Town Board. My name is John Zolo, Town Attorney for the Town of Smithtown. This is a public hearing tonight to consider amending Chapter 112 of the Building Construction, Chapter 112-25 of the Code of the Town of Smithtown, entitled Building Construction. What you have here is, if you went through the ordinance that was presented, is in the nature of housekeeping, and we've inserted, in addition to unsafe buildings, we've inserted the word unsafe structures and structures, so it allows the building official more latitude when dealing with things that are not buildings, but they're structures. So, such as a shed, or on someone's property, they might have something over a driveway to protect the vehicle. So they're not considered buildings, they're considered structures, and it just affords the building official greater latitude in enforcing the town code and going onto the property. And then other amendments in there besides the insertion of unsafe structures is just some housekeeping and minor language changes. But that's basically what this is about. This was done at the request of the building official, Mr. Bongino. So unless anyone has any other questions.
Anyone wish to be heard on this hearing? I'll move to close it.
Second.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Town Board to consider proposed local law 1-2012 entitled Appearance Tickets as it relates to authorized public servants.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor, members of the Town Board. John Zolo, Town Attorney. This, again, is really just a housekeeping measure. There came a discussion with the chief building official that language should be inserted in here with respect to his title and also inspectors, the word inspectors. And apparently, appearance tickets, Chapter 112, had not been included into the zone in this portion of the code. So, again, at the request of the building official, we made these minor changes to insert the word inspectors and also to allow the issuance of summonses under Chapter 112. Again, that's the extent of the zoning ordinance amendment.
Anyone wish to be heard on this change in the ordinance? Close the hearing?
Second.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Town Board to consider the enactment of a proposed local law number 2-1012, repealing 112-1.2 of the code entitled Energy Star Program.
Mr. Supervisor, if I may proceed without the formalities, John Zolo, Town Attorney for Smithtown. This is an interesting proposed local law that, again, was proposed by our building official, Mr. Bongino. And what it does is it recognizes a change in the law concerning an Energy Star program. And what I'd like to do, with the board's indulgence, is just read the memo that was provided to me by Mr. Bongino as to why this was necessary. The background on this is when the Energy Star Homes Code was adopted, it was understood that the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency would at some time in the future revise Energy Star Homes program. The new Energy Star version 3 is beginning implementation and will fully be in place in 2012. The significant revision of the Energy Star Homes program raises questions about whether the town codes on Long Island that incorporate by reference the Energy Star program requirements into the code will need to be amended. The reason for the repeal and the adoption of this, the state building code, is that the New York State local law preempts local governments from adopting building construction codes different from the state code, unless those local law codes are based on special circumstances and are approved by the New York State Fire Prevention and Building Code Council. There is a specific provision in the law that allows local governments with the zoning power to adopt energy conservation construction codes that are more stringent than the state code. Energy Star Homes version 3 is somewhat more complex and comprehensive than the program that was in place when the town codes were adopted. And that is, in fact, the reason why we're doing this. Certain requirements of the Energy Star Homes version 3, such as water management checklist that is not directly related to energy conservation, do not fit under this provision. Therefore, local municipalities cannot adopt Energy Star Homes version 3 as it stands. They would have to adopt separate laws in different aspects. The non-energy conservation related requirements would require you to, again, pass separate code amendments for items that did not fall under the energy conservation plan as proposed by the state. So basically, the state law as proposed is all-encompassing, and it addresses all the town's concerns and more, and the chief building official believes that this is the appropriate way to go, and that's the recommendation, to repeal the existing Energy Star provision of the town code and adopt the state plan.
Okay, thank you.
If anyone has any questions?
Anyone on this? I'll move to close the hearing.
Second. Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilman Wareham?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Correspondence. Number one, Parade Run Walk, Sergeant John W. Cook, VFW Post, Memorial Day Parade, second reading. Number two, Parade Run Walk, St. James, Smithtown Little League, Opening Day Parade, second reading. Number three, Parade Run Walk, American Legion, Donald C. Monroe, Post, Memorial Day Parade, first reading. Number four, Parade Run Walk, Muddy Angels National EMS Memorial Bike Ride, first reading. Number five, Building Department Report, February 2012.
Anyone wish to be heard for or against the awarding of those permits for those walk-run permits? If not, we'll move on. Mr. Wareheim?
Advertise for public hearing number one, the town board to authorize the town clerk to advertise a public hearing to be held at Eugene A. Canataro Senior Center as submitted by Santelli Commercial Developers LLC for a special exception for commercial public recreation use for outdoor soccer fields and indoor batting cages on the property located on the north side of Old Northport Road.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Wareham?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Number two, the town board to authorize the town clerk to advertise for public hearing to be held at the Eugene A. Canataro Senior Center, 19th day of April at 7 o'clock p.m. to consider proposed amendments to Chapter 322 of the Code of the Town of Smithtown entitled Zoning as it relates to site plan review.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Wareham?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Supervisor?
Yes.
Number three, the town board to authorize the clerk to advertise for public hearing to be held at the Eugene A. Canataro Senior Center on the 19th day of April at 7 p.m. to consider proposed amendments to Chapter 248 of the Code of the Town of Smithtown entitled Subdivision of Land as it relates to preliminary layout and final plat.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Wareham?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Number four, the town board to authorize the town clerk to advertise for public hearing to be held at the Eugene A. Canataro Senior Center, April 19th, 7 p.m. to consider the enactment of proposed local law 3-2012, amending local law 12-1984, Chapter 285 of the Code of the Town of Smithtown entitled Trees.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Wareham?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Number five, the town board to authorize the town clerk to advertise for public hearing to be held at the Victor T. List Meeting Room, Town Hall, Smithtown, New York, on Tuesday, May 1st at 2 p.m. to consider the adoption of new zoning map as proposed by the planning department.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Wareham?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes, I have a resolution which fits in the next category. The town board to reject all bids received on February 23rd in connection with a bid for street lighting repairs in the Hot Park industrial area. The next one is for the town board to advertise for bids, sporting goods, street lighting repair, that's out, that's rejected. Maintenance and updated video surveillance equipment, crack and joint sealing on various roads, and Nichols Road improvements. Okay. The bid that was rejected is also being advertised under this section.
Okay, for both of them, we're going to vote. Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes. Town Board to award the following bids and authorize the purchase of associated goods and services. A bid for quarry stone to A&R Materials and Wattrell Brothers as per the bid opening on February 23rd, 2012.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes, Town Board to authorize the clerk to advertise for requests for proposals for concession sales at town facilities due on April 12, 2012.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes, Town Board to approve the following adoption of a revised Year 38 Community Development Program. The town clerk to issue a parade walk permit to the Sergeant John Cook Post. Town attorney to enter into a stipulation of settlement with Civil Service Employees Association. Town clerk to issue a parade run walk permit for the St. James Smithtown Little League. Town Board to approve the appointment of the following persons as members of the Conservation Advisory Board effective March 23rd through December 31, 2013. Mr. Brian Clancy and Mr. Paul Hedger. F is a change order to a pin number, a recovery of sidewalk accessibility curb cut and ramp contract with Jadeco Construction Corporation. Highway Department to rent a dozer from Edward Airbar. The town attorney appropriate official to enter into stipulation of settlement and agreement and consent to the entry of an order with regard to various tax certiorari matters. The sale of 3/4 of an acre density flow rights from the town's transfer of density flow rights to the Smithtown Fire District pursuant to Section 323 of the town for the amount of $65,750 and to authorize the supervisor to sign any and all documents relating to the sale. The town board to grant approval to amend to Chapter 322 of zoning, showrooms, microbreweries, etc., as per the public hearing held on February 7th. The town clerk to publish a public notice regarding proposed locations for the installation of curb cuts for accessibility for the disabled. The supervisor to execute an advertising insertion order and other documents necessary to place and pay for advertisements with Patch Media Corporation on forms approved by the town attorney. And M, the Highway Department to purchase an F-250 pickup truck with a plow from Van Bortle Ford.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes.
Item number 5, the town board, if to do study and deliberation of subject record to issue a secret negative declaration of termination of non-significance in the following matters for reasons stated in the memorandum on the dates indicated. 5A, B, C, and D, application for site plan approval from Michael Frecci, application for transfer development rights, application for site plan approval, Joseph Pizzetta, and change of zone petition, Hess Corporation.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
Yes on A, B, and C, no on D.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes.
Item number 6, the town board to approve the following matters. 6A, town board to grant zoning petition 2011-7 by Hess Corporation for a change of zone from WSI wholesale service industry to NB neighborhood business for a property located on the southeast corner of Jericho Turnpike, New York State Route 25 and Haunted Road, Comac, with conditions suggested in memorandum from the town planning director dated March 19, 2012, public hearing February 23, 2012, secret March 22, 2012.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
No.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
No.
Item number 7, the town board to authorize the controller to execute the following as per 7A through Z. 25 are account transfer and 1 is an account increase in revenue code.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yeah.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes.
Item number 8, the town board to authorize the supervisor to execute the following in a form approved by the town attorney as per 8A and B agreement with Sidney Bound and an agreement with Gloria Lopez.
Councilman McCarthy, Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareham,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
and Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes.
Item number 9, the town board to approve settlement in the following matters as per recommendation of the town attorney as per 9A, B, C, and D. Property damage claim for $6,367.14. All-state insurance claim of $2,244.02. Rachel Hernandez versus the town of Smithtown for $40,000, and Catherine Mioch versus the town of Smithtown, $92.33.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareham,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Item number 10 under personnel, the town board to approve the following personnel matters as per 10A through G. The printed agenda, full-time appointment, seasonal appointment for the Parks Department, medical leave of absence, Traffic Department, part-time appointment, Assistant Town Attorney. E, seasonal appointments and reappointments, Recreation Department, except volunteer services. And G, part-time appointments.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareham,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Yes, one last resolution not on the agenda. Town Board to authorize a work session for April 3rd, 2012 at 10 a.m. in the Town Hall.
Councilman Malloy,
Yes.
Councilman Creighton,
Yes.
Councilman Wareham,
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy,
Yes.
Supervisor Vecchio.
Jacob Fanson.
Good evening, Mr. Supervisor. Good evening, members of the board. Jacob Fanson, 9 Sound Road, Fort Salonga, New York, 11768. I am the owner of the corner where the gas station is supposed to be. What I would like to tell that I've been a resident for the area for 26 years, and I've heard these people who reside in the area for 30 and 40 years, and they all told us about accidents, which are terrible. But all of them told that somebody ran a red light, somebody made a wrong left turn, but nobody mentioned that accident happened because somebody pulling in or out of the Shell gas station. And the Shell gas station was there for 50 years. And second point, all the gas stations on Jericho Turnpike for the traffic bound west on north side. On the south side, it's only one gas station. And if somebody traveling east on Jericho Turnpike, he got a choice, either Gulf Station, which only one, or 4 or 5 gas stations on the other side. Then he has to cross Jericho Turnpike, fill up the tank, and get back, cross again Jericho Turnpike to continue east. And this is really dangerous.
Mr.
So-
Fanson, are you aware that your application has been approved?
Yeah,
You are?
yeah.
Okay. But you still want to go ahead then?
Okay, thank you.
Fred Fox.
Hello, my name's Fred Fox. I am the owner of Foxy's Ice Cream and Snacks, and in the past several years, I've operated the concessions at Short Beach, Long Beach, Smithtown Marina, and Flynn Memorial Park. In November, I submitted a 2-part claim where I asked to be reimbursed for 2 separate issues. A public safety investigation was then initialized. After
Can
the
you pull that
report-
closer to you? I can't seem
I'm
to hear.
sorry.
Pull the microphone to you.
After the report was completed, I was informed that members of the Park Department offered a much different account of my claim. When I heard their version, I was very upset. There was no supporting evidence, not a shred of truth or fact. I had several meetings regarding this, and every time I refuted one excuse after the other, showing their versions to have zero plausibility. I asked for a meeting with all parties because I wanted them to be held accountable for their statements, a meeting that would have enabled us to get to the truth very easily and quickly, but this was always denied. Now this matter has turned into a 5-month ordeal in which I've just been recently told that my contract for 2012 will not be renewed. I asked the town attorney on what grounds was this being done. I was repeatedly given no answer. I disagreed with that because my 2011 contract stated that I would have the concession rights for 2012 as long as there was no negligence or day-to-day service issues on the part of my company. It wasn't until yesterday that I was given a reason by Mr. Zolo, the town attorney, and he told me that it was simply a matter of our day-to-day service, nothing specific. I don't believe this to be the reason. I think it is solely because the claim I put in. In my opinion, there's no way that this can be a service matter. In actuality, this past year, my company has offered more than ever before. Our menus have increased, our hours extended. We have offered breakfast at the campus at Short Beach, and after many years, we were finally able to bring in some live music, all of which was received very positively by the patrons. I also spoke to Tom Heister, Parks Department, Joe Kostecki, Purchasing Department, and Matt Jakubowski from the Town Attorney's Office during and after the season to monitor and make sure that nothing occurred to jeopardize my 2012 renewal. All parties agreed that there was no issues or problems, that there was no complaints or any documentation against my company. They all asked if I was coming back, and I always replied yes. In addition, my board liaison, Mr. McCarthy, stopped by at the end of the season during one of our events. He asked me if I was coming back. I said yes, and then we even spent a few minutes discussing some ideas to enhance the beaches for 2012. So my question is, how all of a sudden, after every person that I deal with on a day-to-day basis and every department had no issues, there was no documentation, how could all of a sudden my service become into question? I have never been given any specific reason as to why.
Okay, your time is up. There is a concession opening, if you will, to be delivered on April 12th. Are you going to apply? Well, to be honest, you need to be up there.
The reason I'm here, Mr. Supervisor, is because I'm still trying to figure out why my contract rights for 2012 season are not being renewed.
Oh, I see, okay.
That being said, under those set of circumstances, and I feel confident that I've addressed a few issues that Mr. Zola, in the last couple of weeks has addressed to me, I don't even feel confident going forward in the bidding process that I would even have a reasonable shot. Having said that, my main reason is, like I said, I've stated that I've dealt with everyone that I need to deal with on a daily basis, 3 different departments, all individuals, and I've never been told one issue in 2011 regarding my service. Like I said, last year was the year we offered more to the town residents, and we look forward to going, taking that to the next step in 2012. So that's my main issue.
You had an extension?
We had an agreement in 2011.
To renew?
Right, to renew, that I would,
Okay.
right.
And you were now told you can't renew?
And I was told, like I said, and that contract states that either, unless there's a service issue, that I would have the concession rights. That was part of the agreement after 2010. So my question is, if everyone I deal with has said that there's never been any issues, and I didn't want it to be jeopardized, so I monitored it throughout the year. I was very on top of it. So how can all of a sudden, after the season is over, I now have problems with my service? That's my issue. Thank you.
Thank you. David Keeler?
My name is David Keller. I'd like to know when the bid's going out for the town parks, and if the paperwork, if it's approved for this year, when could I pick up the paperwork from the town clerk?
That's a question I can't answer. Does the town attorney have an answer?
It's on the agenda.
It's on the agenda?
It's going out, should be able to pick it up shortly.
That's for the concession. It's being
For
advertised
the concessions for the parks.
April 12, 2012. It'll be available.
No,
Nope.
that's when it's going to be
It's going to be opened on the 12th.
It'll be available next Wednesday.
It'll be available next Wednesday.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
That's all.
Mr. Polifka? I guess he's, did I say it right? Polivka? Okay, Carl Walsh Jr.?
Good evening, Town Board. I'm here about a meeting, a special Town Board work session that was held a while ago with Mr. Glenn Jorgensen, the Highway Superintendent, where he asked for a $10 million increasement over a certain number of years for the roads. The roads really need it, and he is right where years ago there were 350 miles of good road, now it's switched to 100 miles of good road and 350 miles of bad road. Thank God we didn't have a bad winter this year, so the roads didn't take a real toll. And Mr. Jorgensen was right that the prior superintendent, if you look, his paving went down while he was in office, and Mr. Jorgensen's paving has gone up. And if you do look at his road program from last year at least, I know he hasn't submitted it for this year, the micro sealing is a fraction of what Mr. Ryan wanted to do. And Mr. Vecchio brought up the point that Mr. Jorgensen didn't use all of his money last year in the road program. Part of it is because of the hurricane. That took 3 weeks of cleanup every day where the highway was doing cleanup. They weren't on the roads. They couldn't pave the road until they cleaned it up. And also, Mr. Vecchio brought up $1 million pension payment. Part of the problem with that is, and not being able to hire people in the highway, is that this town board did not vote on the incentive that was legislated by the state. This town was the only town besides, I believe, North Hempstead on Long Island and Nassau and Suffolk that voted against the incentive. If you did vote against it, if you did vote for that incentive, you would have reduced pension payments, you would have reduced health insurance costs, because new employees now have to pay part of their health insurance. Also, if you did get out the Tier 1 and Tier 2 members that are maxed out on sick time, that's 1,200 hours of sick time that you have to pay due to the contract. The second issue I have is a transfer that happened at the last night meeting, 2 transfers. One was why was $1,292 taken from the New York State Employee Retirement System and transferred to the radio service contract in the highway? And the second one is why was money taken from the appraisals budget line, the Social Security line, and $90,969,000 from New York State Employee Pension Fund to go into the litigation and counsel in the town attorney line? That was a total of $150,000. Why are we taking money from the New York State Employee System budget line and putting it into other budget lines? I mean, I realize that this happens all the time, but I mean, if you say we need $1 million in a pension payment, why are we taking money out of the budget line? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'll move to close the meeting.
Second. Supervisor Vecchio?
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy?
Yes.
Councilman Wareheim?
Yes.
Councilman Creighton?
Yes.
Councilman Malloy?
Yes.